Straight up.
When I think of Jesus, I think of the same thought, but just a little different. I think he who loves much forgives much. What you got? He loves you.
Glory to God. Welcome back to your way happy Bible study on CBN. We left off in Exodus chapter 39 and verse 8 is where we're picking up our study. I hope you're enjoying this study in Exodus. I know there's a lot of details regarding the temple, but all of these things are very important, and they teach us important things about our God, about our Father who loves us. Let's pick it up in Exodus chapter 39 and verse 8. And he made the breastplate of cunning work, like the work of the ephod, of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. It was 4 square. They made the breastplate double. A span was the length thereof, and a span the breadth thereof, being doubled. In verse 10, and they set it in 4 rows of stones. The first row was a sardius, a topaz, and a carbuncle. This was the first row. And the second row, an emerald, a sapphire, and a diamond. And the third row, a ligure, an agate, and an amethyst. And the fourth row, a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper. They were enclosed in ouches of gold in their enclosings. And the stones were according to the names of the children of Israel, 12, according to their names, like the engravings of a signet, every one with his name according to the 12 tribes. You also have in the New Jerusalem, you have the 12 layers of foundation stones, which are also these very same stones. 2. And some of them are given different names. But you're looking at a shadow of the things to come in the Old Testament. So he's showing these precious stones, each one for each tribe. Then you have 12 foundations, one for each of the disciples. And they're not exactly the same, because there's a chrysoprase, and there's so the stones, there are 12 stones in the foundation of the New Jerusalem, 12 layers of stones. But you're looking at a picture of the things to come. As you see one stone for each of the tribes here, you have one stone for each of the disciples. And then you have the names of the tribes on the gates, the 12 gates of the New Jerusalem. So see, the foundation stones were built on the disciples. in the New Jerusalem, because the church is built upon Jesus taught them and then sent them out. So they're the foundation stones for the New Jerusalem. It's very interesting, and as you learn from the Old Testament, it makes the New Testament make a whole lot more sense. Okay? In verse 15 of Exodus 39, and they made upon the breastplate chains at the ends of wreathen work of pure gold. In verse 16, and they made 2 ouches of gold and 2 gold rings, and put the 2 rings in the 2 ends of the breastplate. And they put the 2 wreathen chains of gold in the 2 rings on the ends of the breastplate. And the 2 ends of the 2 wreathen chains they fastened in the 2 ouches, and put them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod before it. In verse 19 of Exodus 39, and they made 2 rings of gold and put them on the 2 ends of the breastplate upon the border of it, which was on the side of the ephod inward. And they made 2 other golden rings and put them on the 2 sides of the ephod underneath, toward the forepart of it, over against the other coupling thereof, above the curious girdle of the ephod. And they did bind the breastplate by his rings unto the rings of the ephod with a lace of blue, that it might be above the curious girdle of the ephod, and that the breastplate might not be loosed from the ephod, as the Lord commanded Moses. In verse 22, and he made the robe of the ephod of woven work, all of blue. And there was an hole in the midst of the robe, as the hole of a habergeon, with a band around about the hole, that it should not rend, so it wouldn't tear. In verse 24 of Exodus 39, and they made upon the hems of the robe pomegranates of blue and purple and scarlet and twined linen. And they made bells of pure gold, and put the bells between the pomegranates upon the hem of the robe, round about between the pomegranates. A bell and a pomegranate, a bell and a pomegranate, round about the hem of the robe to minister in, as the Lord commanded Moses. Now these bells were important because the priest was tinkling as he walked with the bells. You could hear the bells tinkling as he would walk. And he would go in to offer sacrifices for the people and then come out. In verse 27, and they made coats of fine linen of woven work for Aaron and for his sons, and a mitre of fine linen, and goodly bonnets of fine linen, and linen breeches of fine twined linen, and a girdle of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet of needlework, as the Lord commanded Moses. So as you can see, the priest's garments were very important, and they were told exactly how to make them, even down to their underwear. In verse 30, and they made the plate of the holy crown of pure gold, and wrote it upon a writing, like to the engravings of a signet, holiness to the Lord. And they tied unto it a lace of blue, to fasten it on high upon the mitre, as the Lord commanded Moses. In verse 32 of Exodus 39, thus was all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation finished. And the children of Israel did according to all that the Lord commanded Moses, so did they. And they brought the tabernacle unto Moses, the tent, and all his furniture, his taches, his boards, his bars, and his pillars, and his sockets. and the covering of ram skins dyed red, and the covering of badgers' skins, and the veil of the covering, the ark of the testimony and the staves thereof, and the mercy seat, the table and all the vessels thereof, and the showbread, the pure candlestick with the lamps thereof, even with the lamps to be set in order, and all the vessels thereof, and the oil for light. This is Exodus chapter 39, verse 38. And the golden altar, and the anointing oil, and the sweet incense, and the hanging for the tabernacle door, the brazen altar, and his grate of brass, his staves, and all his vessels, the laver and his foot, the hangings of the court, his pillars and his sockets, and the hanging for the court gate, his cords and his pins, and all the vessels of the service of the tabernacle, for the tent of the congregation, the cloths of service to do service in the holy place, and the holy garments for Aaron the priest, and his sons' garments to minister in the priest's office, according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. So the children of Israel made all the work. And Moses did look upon all the work, and behold, they had done it as the Lord had commanded. Even so had they done it, and Moses blessed them. We'll go straight into chapter 40. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, On the first day of the first month shalt thou set up the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation, and thou shalt put therein the ark of the testimony, and cover the ark with the veil. And thou shalt bring in the table, and set in order the things that are to be set in order upon it. And thou shalt bring in the candlestick, and light the lamps thereof. Thou shalt set the altar of gold for the incense before the ark of the testimony, and put the hanging of the door to the tabernacle. And thou shalt set the altar of the burnt offering before the door of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation. So not only has he told them how to make all of these things, but he's also telling them exactly where to position all of these things inside the tabernacle. In verse 7 of Exodus chapter 40, And thou shalt set the laver between the tent of the congregation and the altar, and shalt put water therein. And thou shalt set up the court round about, and hang up the hanging at the court gate. And thou shalt take the anointing oil, and anoint the tabernacle, and all that is therein, and shalt hallow it. Now remember what you've heard that word before, hallow. Hallowed be thy name in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. It means to be revered, reverenced, to be high and lifted up. So he's saying this is a sacred thing. You're to hallow it. It is to be sacred and reverenced. Okay? And all the vessels thereof, and it shall be holy. And thou shalt anoint the altar of the burnt offering, and all his vessels, and sanctify the altar. And it shall be an altar most holy. And thou shalt anoint the laver and his foot, and sanctify it. And thou shalt bring Aaron and his sons unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and wash them with water. In verse 13 of Exodus chapter 40, And thou shalt put upon Aaron the holy garments, and anoint him, and sanctify him, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. And thou shalt bring his sons, and clothe them with coats, and thou shalt anoint them as thou didst anoint their father, that they may minister unto me in the priest's office. For their anointing shall surely be an everlasting priesthood throughout their generations. Now, notice, as long as you have a tabernacle or a temple, you have descendants of Aaron. who are ministering in that. And as they build the third temple in the future, they're going to want to reestablish the priesthood of Aaron. Okay? In verse 16, thus did Moses according to all that the Lord commanded him, so did he. And so you have now the Levites. They carry on the priesthood of Aaron. And it came to pass in the first month in the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was reared up. And Moses reared up the tabernacle and fastened his sockets and set up the boards thereof and put in the bars thereof and reared up his pillars. So see, they made all of the pieces of the tabernacle, all of the furnishings, everything, and then they put it together. So they weren't putting it together as they were making these things. They made all of the temple elements and then they put it together. So it says in verse 18 of Exodus 40, and Moses reared up the tabernacle and fastened his sockets and set up the boards thereof and put in the bars thereof and reared up his pillars. In verse 19, and he spread abroad the tent over the tabernacle and put the covering of the tent above upon it, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he took and put the testimony into the ark and set the staves on the ark and put the mercy seat above upon the ark. And he brought the ark into the tabernacle and set up the veil of the covering and covered the ark of the testimony, as the Lord commanded Moses. In verse 22 of Exodus chapter 40, and he put the table in the tent of the congregation upon the side of the tabernacle northward without the veil. And he set the bread in order upon it before the Lord, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And he put the candlestick in the tent of the congregation over against the table on the side of the tabernacle southward. And he lighted the lamps before the Lord as the Lord commanded Moses. In verse 26, and he put the golden altar in the tent of the congregation before the veil. And he burnt sweet incense thereon as the Lord commanded Moses. And he set up the hanging at the door of the tabernacle, and he put the altar of the burnt offering by the door of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation, and offered upon it the burnt offering and the meat offering, as the Lord commanded Moses. In verse 30, and he set the laver between the tent of the congregation and the altar, and put water there to wash withal. In verse 31, and Moses and Aaron and his sons washed their hands and their feet thereat. When they went into the tent of the congregation, and when they came near unto the altar, they washed, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he reared up the court round about the tabernacle and the altar, and set up the hanging of the court gate. So Moses finished the work. Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. That's so cool. Wow. Do you hear that? Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the congregation because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. That's so cool. And when the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the children of Israel went onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud were not taken up, then they journeyed not till the day that it was taken up, So that's how they knew when to move, was because the cloud settled down upon the tabernacle and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle and it stayed there. And then when it would leave, when the cloud would be taken up off the tabernacle, they knew they were to take it down and they were to leave and go to another place and set it back up. It says, for the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day, and fire was on it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. So it wasn't just right there where Pharaoh was trying to come after them, where you had the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud. You had that the whole time that they were in the desert wandering. Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? And it's exactly 9:30, right as we finish up. That's pretty amazing in itself too, isn't it? We've completed the book of Exodus now, and in our next study, I never know when we're going to be able to do studies now. You'll just have to check back and find out. I don't know when we'll be here. Possibly tomorrow, should the Lord allow. Things have been so fluid lately, we just don't know. But don't give up on us. We're going to continue to try to come back and do these studies as often as possible. We're going to go through the entire Bible, should the Lord tarry. I love you guys. God bless you. Thanks for studying with me today. And should the Lord tarry, we will see you again here, there.